Now that we have the gun, reload your autosave to get out of Ulthane's place. I'd recommend making a save here for practice too. We've been using the sword dash for ground movement thus far, but it's time to introduce gun dashing. Walking with the gun is normally very slow, but if we do focus dashes in the air, shooting cancels it and preserves our momentum for a couple of seconds. The inputs are pretty simple then. Jump, dash, shoot. You'll need to keep focus held down and can only travel backwards or sideways, but we can use Q mode to prevent locking onto enemies. So, it's faster than sword dashing and can be used everywhere, but there are a few new things to keep in mind. When gun dashing backwards and running into an incline, the ground eats the dash, so you start moving really slowly. For some reason, sideways dash is immune to this, so it ends up being the preferred method of movement. Going backwards is definitely easier to use though, so I'll teach with that, and then as you progress you can just transition to sideways after you learn the area. You may also find that the dash sometimes goes nowhere. This is from shooting with the gun too early. The minimum timing on starting the shot is around 1/20th of a second, just judging by recordings. So when practicing, try to slide from jump to dash as fast as you can, but make sure to delay the gun for a split second. You'll also need to pay attention to declines since you'll be in the air longer. In these instances, just wait for war to land before starting your next gun dash input, or you might get an empty ground dash. However, there is a trick for this that other runners use for speed and consistency. If you hold Alt after the first dash, it won't activate again on the ground, but when you jump it'll dash in the first frame possible. Then you just have to time the gun, and you'll have ridiculously fast gun dashes without much issue. And finally, this section will focus a lot on gun dashing, so it's a good segment to replay to work on your tech skill. For now, let's reload our save and get back to the route. We want to line up with the tunnel ahead, then turn around and gun dash backwards. We'll pull up Q mode every time we gun dash. Like I said, it negates the enemy targeting a focus, and it lets us turn while moving. From here on out, we'll be focusing on the minimap to navigate. Keep the elevation change in mind when coming out of the pipe and delay your rhythm as needed. We'll be entering the shop to buy a Chaos Potion. Scroll down to the bottom for it. Now exit the shop and get into your menu. We need to equip the gun. It'll replace the horn on 1. The horn goes back on 3. Then set the Possession Potion on 2. As you exit the menu, spam 1 to swap to the gun, and then right click to get into the warp menu, and choose Scalding Gallows again. Going through the warp zone is the same as last time, but we won't have to worry about getting stuck on the stairs, which is nice. When you hit the end, just turn and start jumping to the portal. The infinite jump will work the same as before, but you may notice that the gun feels less stilted in the air since it doesn't freeze you. Once we come out, we'll turn left and jump out of Vulgrim's house, taking a wide left to get to the road. As you approach, watch for the autosave icon, again letting us know that the area behind the door is loaded. The upper section has an invisible wall on the right, so don't dash until you're clear of it. I just push into it at an angle so I know when I'm past. There's not a perfect way to line up the next gun dash section, but let's use the left spire in front. The first few gun dashes are downhill, so we have to be careful with timing, but then it heads uphill and is easier. The incline flattens off eventually, which means that we've gone far enough. If we look off the cliff to the right, there's a big sewer pipe below us, which we'll be dropping onto. Once on top, look behind war for a small room with a chest in it and run under it. If you jump right below the chest, you'll get an action prompt that puts you back inbounds and gives a new enchantment. It's actually one of the endgame ones, so pause after the message and equip it to your sword. Now we'll drop down and gun dash along the tunnel wall. Using Q modes for slight adjustments is really helpful here. When you get to the stairs, start infinite jumping up the wall and make your way to the top of the broken pipe. And then, using the mini-map in here, we should be able to alternate between backwards and sideways to make it through and into the dry road. There's a lot of downhill here, so watch for war to land before starting another dash. At the bottom of this canyon part, we want to turn and head down the main street to hit a cutscene trigger. After the cutscene, we'll dash down this ramp and jump out to Vulgrim. This one in particular is really easy to forget, so make this detour a habit even in practice. When we come back out, turn and gun dash back up the ramp and turn left. The minimap is good here, but there are random objects which we'll have to memorize in order to move unimpeded. It's safe to stay in the middle of the road for most of this tunnel. As you go around the corner, between the two sets of stairs is a big line of cars. If you hug the wall, war generally clears it without getting stuck. When you get to the edge of the road, just jump out over the pit and into the pipe on the left. Gun dash down this, and then when you take the second 90-degree corner, you'll see a plant that normally eats war. What you want to do is just dash forward, shoot it, cancel Q mode, and then start infinite jumping forward. There's kind of a nasty loading zone right here, so use the freeze to check your animation and set up for the next infinite jump or dash. That way you don't drop it. And when you make it through, we'll just be gun dashing up and around to pick up another Vulgrim location. The railings here are easy to get caught on, so aim for the center of the sand pile on the minimap. After Vulgrim, we just continue like before and trigger the Ashlands cutscene. This area has sand that slows war to crawl, but the gun animation overrides it, so we can gun dash all along the sand as long as we don't mess up. So when the cutscene's over, we'll be aiming at the obvious next safe spot and gun dashing back to it. Now on the left, we'll see a wooden fort a bit behind the rocks, which has a pit around it. So we'll be turning around and gun dashing into it. The watcher is annoying here, so we'll have to use Q mode to kind of aim ourselves as we go back. One thing to keep in mind is that if your gun dashing gets interrupted for any reason, there's usually not a way to recover, and you'll get eaten, making you reload the lost autosave. When we drop into the pit, we'll turn around and look for the blue orb up to the next level. One trick is that as we get the boost, if you shoot the gun, you keep your upward momentum, and we'll save a couple IJs onto the top platform. The next stop from here is the cliff in front of us, so we'll jump out, and being careful not to bonk on anything with our forward dashes. When we get up, we'll kind of line up parallel with the left side of the cliff. We'll just turn around and start gun dashing back until we get there. The minimap will come into view as we hit the sand. We want to just keep going back, and we should see like the boundary of the level on the left. We want to just kind of hug that, and then you'll see a small room underneath the upper platforms. Once we get inside, we want to just cancel Q mode and start jumping up to the cliffs above us. We have to dash backwards over the wooden bridge, because that's where the loading zone is for the next part of the cave. And as you go forward, you can just start infinite jumping, and there's a nice spot in the cliff that War can wedge himself into. We just want to do like 4 or 5 dashes forward and drop down a little. You don't want to be forward dashing here for a while. The different clumps of rock have a lot of invisible walls, so just try to get more height until you see that you're in the clear. The right side has slightly lower walls, so I aim for that area. As you pass through the cliffs, just dash forward through the room and keep an eye out for the exit on the opposite side. To the left of it, there should be this multi-tiered rock face with a pointy boulder in the middle of the top of it, and that's where we'll land next. Try to get a little more height than necessary. The front is a little higher than it looks. Just dash forward once you get on top until you fall off of the edge. You'll turn a little bit to the left and start heading down to the end of this next room. You don't have to maintain much height, so you should just be able to spam forward dash. If you feel comfortable with forward infinite dashing, you can start trying to use focus with backwards and sideways dashes to speed up. The dashes with focus are much longer, don't lose height, and won't bounce off walls. If you use Q mode as well, it's just as flexible for turning as going forward. When you hit the end, we want to drop onto the exit platform, as that'll trigger a cutscene that we need for the next part. And after the cutscene, we'll just dash forward and enter the horse arena. This little bit of weirdness has become the most iconic part of the Darksiders speedrun. We've loaded the arena fight, but in skipping over load zones, the floor hasn't bothered to show up. The enemies immediately start falling and will die from going too far, but War has no such restriction. So, we'll be falling through several waves, clearing them much faster than fighting could be. We'll just wait out the first few waves, and pretty soon we should see some horses drop down. This is the cue to start paying attention again. When these ones disappear, we'll see the car throwers appear and have a bit of RNG come into play. To clear this round, both of the car throwers have to fall, but the second one isn't guaranteed. To check for this, we just infinite jump up and look to the north, where both should fall into view if it's going to work. And when you see the second one, jump towards it so that it targets you, then start falling back down. They fall faster when targeting an object, so you want them to just target on you. When the second one disappears, we'll pause and do a manual save. Reloading this save forces the arena to come back and places at the last round. The last round requires an action prompt, so we can't do it out of bounds. And that should conclude this part. Like I said, it's one of the better segments to practice for technical skill, since it has long stretches of straight gun dashing and infinite jumping, with bits of precise navigation requiring switching between the two quickly.
And the stitching's supposed to be the